Stand where you're gonna stand. You just spit the screen horn out, so I have to like back up. Good, don't move.
First try. Oh. Second try. Oh. Third try. Boom. Let's start the video. All right, today we're talking about how to make a calorie deficit not suck. For a couple reasons. Number one is I want to talk about some practical strategies you can use, but also psychological. One of the things that really pisses me off in the fitness industry is when people say something to the effect of, well, just eat less and move more. Just eat in a calorie deficit. And they're right, just eat in a calorie deficit, but it's really fucking hard. It's difficult. So I want you to have practical strategies you can use, but also to understand how you can change your mindset, almost how you can manipulate your mindset to get in a better place mentally and emotionally so that sticking to a calorie deficit doesn't suck as much. This right here, if you follow me on Instagram, you might know what this is. If you don't follow me on Instagram, make sure you do. This is the most important concept, I think, all right? This is one way to structure your calories. This I will explain in a moment. This I think is actually really cool. It's like the order of events in terms of how to structure your meals. This is beware of ... I'll explain that later on. This I think is really cool. It's how to approach a party or a social event or a social gathering. So make sure you don't skip that part. Don't skip any of it, but especially not that part. And then finally, I want to give you some of my personal recommendations for what foods I find the most filling and what foods I find to be the least filling. All right, so with that being said, let's get into it. So YCFU stands for you can't fuck this up. If you listen to anything in this video, please listen to this. I almost made it last because all the YouTube experts say that if you put the most important thing last, you'll increase your watch time. And I wanted to make it first because if, goodness forbid, you don't watch the whole video, please just watch this one part. It is the most important thing. And I made an Instagram post about it saying you can't fuck this up. The most recurring theme among the comments was, I really needed to hear this. And for me as a content creator and a coach, that's one of the most important things I look for in comments, because if a lot of people are saying that, it means a lot of people are struggling with it. The purpose behind you can't fuck this up, and especially with how it relates to a calorie deficit. Calorie deficits, like, they do suck. It's not fun. And a lot of coaches and fitness marketers will be like, I'm gonna give you a diet that you will never be hungry again. You'll never have a single craving. You'll burn fat faster than ever. You'll get shredded, and you can eat anything and everything you want as much as you want, yada, yada, yada. It's bullshit. You can have whatever you want in moderation. It's in moderation. And that in and of itself it's difficult. You can't just eat whatever you want as much as you want and can expect to make a lot of progress. Anytime you put restrictions on yourself, it's going to be difficult. And that's okay, but it's important to be honest with ourselves. In terms of you can't fuck this up, one thing I've noticed with a lot of clients, inner circle members, and just people in general, as soon as they go over their calories, or even if you're not tracking calories, as soon as you go out to eat on a Friday night dinner and you have some pizza, maybe a beer, maybe a slice of cake, you think, I fucked up. I ruined everything. And you use that fuck up as a justification, consciously or not, to continue fucking up, to keep going off track. So if it's Friday night, well, I screwed up already, like I ruined everything, so whatever, I'll just get back on track on Monday. And what that does is it justifies you eating as much as you possibly can the entire weekend of junk and of very high calorie foods and things that you know you won't be having during the week. So you load up on them because you know you're not gonna be having them during the week. So you might as well have as much as you can, and then you restrict all week. And then you repeat that process over and over and over again. And the reason I want you to know you can't f this up is because it's actually true. As long as you get right back on track. Imagine on Friday night you go out for some pizza, beer, cake, whatever. I don't care if you have an entire box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I don't care if you go 2,000 calories over what your requirement was. You didn't fuck up as long as you get back on track. There's no race here. There's no finish line. There's no end date. This is for life. This is forever. You can't fail as long as you get back on track, period. I mean, there are people who literally never exercise their entire life, never pay attention to their nutrition, get massively overweight, and then overcome all odds, lose hundreds of pounds, get ridiculously healthy, After years and years and years and years of doing the complete opposite. Imagine if they had that mindset of, oh, I f***ed up, like, it's over, it's done, why bother? And you're allowing yourself after one night or 2 nights or a vacation, a week off, to think that you f***ed up. It's bullshit. And it's not doing yourself justice. So as soon as you realize you can't f*** this up, you no longer use that as an excuse, you get back on track more quickly, and you make faster progress. All right, so we got that one out of the way, cross it off. Now I want to talk to you about what I call the jab deficit. And before I tell you what it is, I just want to preface by saying I've tried a lot of different methods throughout my career as a coach, most of them not working. Most of them not working enough to warrant making them public for people to see. I only want to show you things that have worked very well. And the jab deficit has worked so well on such a consistent basis with so many people who've been struggling to lose fat, especially having difficulty being consistent in a calorie deficit. This is a really, really good thing to try. Now, the reason I came up with the jab deficit is because I saw a lot of people, and continue to see a lot of people, really struggle with being in a deficit for 2, 3, 4 months at a time. And that's how sort of most people approach their fat loss. They go for phases of 3, 4 months or longer, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, as long as you can be consistent. But for most of us, myself included a lot of times, that's really fucking difficult. And rather than try and jam a square peg into a round hole, I came up with a jab deficit. And essentially what that is, instead of trying to do a deficit straight for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever it is, you take brief periods of time, 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, in which you are in a deficit, followed immediately by maintenance phases, where you increase your calories. Not so much that you're in a surplus, but enough that you're no longer in a deficit. Because one of the main reasons why calorie deficits suck is because you're going for so long in which you have to restrict yourself. And if the time away, the distance to that end goal is further and further and further, man, it can just be draining on your motivation, your willpower. Whereas if you have, let's say for example, a 14-day or 21-day deficit, it's just a brief enough period of time in which you can be like, I can do this. I can do this 100%, or maybe I can do this 90%. And then doing that for 3 weeks, 90%, you're gonna get very quick, very rapid results. Then by the time those 3 weeks are up, you go into maintenance. You increase your calories a little bit. Now you get a mental and emotional break. You can eat a little bit more and then go back into another deficit a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. So generally my recommendation here is to go into a deficit for 1 to 3 weeks, but you have to be very clear with what your deficit length is gonna be. So if you're gonna go for 1 week, do 1 week. If you're gonna go for 3 weeks, say 3 weeks. But do what you say you're gonna do and be very clear and explicit. There cannot be any ambiguity. And then do the same exact thing with your maintenance period. If you wanna take 1 week of maintenance, take 1 week of maintenance. If you wanna take 3 weeks, take 3 weeks. If you wanna take 6 weeks, take 6. Either way, what's gonna happen here is you'll make fat loss progress, maintain. Fat loss progress, maintain, rather than just have this long time frame without really not being sure when you're gonna have to stop or when you're gonna be able to stop, and then being inconsistent and feeling like you screwed up and then perpetually going on and off and not making any progress. This way you can be on, maintain, on, maintain. It's basically you make 1 step forward, then you pause. 1 step forward, pause. 1 step forward, pause. And it might seem, especially when you go into your first few maintenance periods, that you're losing progress, but it's so much more effective, especially if you struggle with that long-term consistency. In terms of how much of a deficit you can be in, some people, if you're doing that 1 week time frame, they'll do more of a rapid fat loss approach. And by the way, if you haven't seen my rapid fat loss video, the link is in the description. It's one of my more popular videos we've done recently, and it will give you the ins and outs emotionally, psychologically, and practically for how to do rapid fat loss. That being said, you can also do more of a sustainable fat loss approach here. Rather than getting your calories really, really low and possibly either exacerbating binge eating issues and or losing muscle, do more sustainable fat loss. If you're not sure how many calories you should eat for fat loss, link in the description to my video telling you exactly how many calories you should eat, so there's no ambiguity there. But either way, you're in complete control. You decide how quick, how rapid, or how sustainable you want to do this, and you decide for how long. And as long as you stick to this for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, you can do it very sustainably without going out of control, without losing your mind, without letting that sucky period get to be too long. And that way you can just be more consistent over the long term. All right, with that out of the way, I'm gonna be very brief with this one. Only focus on your calories and your protein. Now, I should preface and say, if you are a physique competitor, if you are a bodybuilder, or even if you're a high-level athlete, triathlete, marathon runner, professional sports player, if you're doing something at a very high elite level, I wouldn't recommend this. I would work with a high-level sports nutritionist to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. For general population, or even for high-level powerlifters, this is exactly what I did when I deadlifted 4 times my body weight. I only focused on my calories and my protein. Calories are number 1, protein is number 2. That's it. I didn't care about my carbs, I didn't care about my fats. And a lot of people hear, oh my God, like you can have as many carbs as you want, you can have as many fats as you want. It's like, yeah, as long as it falls within your calorie and your protein guidelines. And again, the link to my video explaining how many calories and how much protein you should have is in the description, so you know exactly how many. But by focusing only on this, calories and protein, you don't let all the extra numbers and all the math and everything confuse you or stress you out. This is another really important part about why calorie deficits can suck, because you have so many numbers. And when you're trying to like match and make sure your fats are hit and your carbs are hit and your protein's hit and your calories are hit, not to mention everything else you're dealing with in life and your lifting and maybe kids, your job, whatever, maybe your car broke down, whatever the fuck is going on in your life, it's stressful. So the fewer things you have to worry about, the easier it is to handle long term. My recommendation, only focus on your calories and your protein. I'm actually really proud of myself. I didn't think I would be that brief with it, so that's exciting. Whoops, I forgot to exit out. Let's just put a circle around all of them now. Let's talk about the order of events. The order of events is basically which foods and which types of foods fill you up more or less quickly. And I want to give you an example of what I mean. Foods that are higher in fat, whether you're talking about salmon or whole eggs, or could be nut butters, could be olives, whatever it is, higher fat foods, they tend to fill you up more over the long term, but it takes longer to get full because they're slower digesting. On the other hand, carbohydrates, more starchier carbs, they fill you up more quickly, but not as much for the long term. So that could be bread, pasta, cereal. They'll fill you up very fast, but not as much down the road several hours later. So with this knowledge, you can set yourself up to make sure that you're not starving or not hungrier than you need to be. And I want to clarify, when you're in a calorie deficit for a consistent period of time, you're gonna be hungry. You are, that's part of the process. You shouldn't be ravenous. You shouldn't be starving, but a little bit of hunger, it's normal. And it's actually one of the questions I ask my clients, my inner circle members, if they've supposedly been in a deficit for 4-8 weeks and they're not making any progress with their pictures, their measurements, their weight, their clothing, I'll ask, how's your hunger on a scale of 1 to 10? And if they come back and they say, you know what, like, I'm really not hungry at all, I'm like, odds are you're not being very consistent or you're inaccurately tracking how much you're eating. And it's really important to remember, because again, a lot of marketers are gonna come at you and say, this diet, you'll never be hungry. You can eat as much as you want and you'll never be hungry. It's like, that's bullshit. If you're in a deficit, you're gonna be pretty hungry, at least some of the time. And by figuring out how we can structure your meals and what order you can put your food, it's just one helpful way to stay more full and be not as hungry as you might have been otherwise. So I'm gonna give you 2 different strategies here. The first one is just overarching for your meals. When you're trying to lose fat, obviously you're gonna wanna have more fruits and vegetables. So for me personally, when I'm starting out a meal, I'll first have a big salad. And it doesn't always work. I don't want a salad for breakfast, Jordan. Do I have to have a salad before my omelet? No, you don't have to fucking have a salad if you don't want to. But generally speaking, the more veggies you eat, the more full you're gonna get. That's how it works. I like to start with some type of a salad. For me, I like Israeli salad, cucumbers, tomatoes, onions, garlic, olive oil. It's amazing. And notice a little bit of olive oil, very high fat. I put that at the very beginning. It's not gonna fill me up. You have to be very careful. You have to understand that a little bit of olive oil goes a long way in terms of calories. So just put a little bit on there at the very beginning with a lot of vegetables, because I know that's gonna fill me up, and the olive oil, it's gonna be slow digesting and fill me up down the road. Also, maybe put some olives on there as well. Those will also help fill me up. Olives for me are one of my all-time favorite hunger quenching foods or hunger blunting foods, whatever that is. Actually, I talk about that in my personal recommendations later in this video. Then from there, protein. I know you've probably heard it a million times. Protein is the most filling of all the macronutrients. So I always go from fruits and vegetables, a little bit of fat, to protein. And then from there, that's when I'll start to incorporate more carbs. And by the time I start to get to my carbs, you'll start to feel more full. You'll start to feel the fat from earlier digesting, sitting in your stomach, so that now you can have your carbs, and by the end of the meal, you'll be really full. You'll be good to go. And for me, this order of events has helped a lot make calorie deficits suck less, right? Still, you will be hungrier in general, but it works really well to suck less. Also, second strategy here, one thing that has worked very, very well for myself, my inner circle members, my clients, is if you're trying to lose fat, and also if you're struggling to hit your protein intake, one thing you can do is have a protein shake before every meal, or maybe have a protein shake before 1 or 2 meals in your day. For me personally, I'll just take a scoop of protein, some almond milk or water, and I'm good to go. That way, I have that before my meal. So I fill up, the fluids, the liquids will help fill me up a lot. I help reach my protein intake, and by the time I get to the end of my meal, I'm much more full. So if you're struggling with your protein and or hunger, it's a really good way to both fill up and hit your protein intake. All right, so I'm gonna try and make this section brief as well. We're done with that. Now, this one is very interesting to me, and I think a lot of it has to do with the psychology of when you're really tracking and when you're being really meticulous about how much you're eating. It can be very easy to think about it so much and make it such a priority all the time that you actually end up making yourself hungrier than you would be otherwise. And so what I want you to be aware of is only focusing on the low calorie foods. So for example, I know one thing I used to struggle with is I would only have the low fat or no fat yogurts or cottage cheese, for example, which I think are two amazing foods, very high protein, very low calorie. But when all I ate was the very low fat or no fat, I would actually end up getting hungrier than if I just had the full fat or higher fat version. Again, because like I just said, higher fat, it might not fill you up as quickly, but longer term, it will have a much more satiating effect. It's gonna sit in your stomach, it's gonna fill you up more. A lot of people will do this, for example, with rice cakes. They think, oh my God, they're so low calorie, they're great. Those don't fill you up at all. And maybe they fill up some people, but personally, if I wanna have some type of bread, I'm gonna get real bread. Or I'm gonna get like a bagel, which will be way more filling than a rice cake and more enjoyable. And this is also where the power of understanding why calories are the most important can really help, because you're not gonna feel guilty about having a bagel because some Joe stick said that bagels are bad for you. Just remember, if you're always looking for the lower calorie, no calorie diet options, sometimes it can be psychological and in your head so that you're gonna end up getting more hungry, which is the exact opposite of the point of those things. Now I will say, for example, I would way rather you have Diet Coke than regular Coke. I'm not gonna say go have the regular Coke, which is an outrageous amount of calories, a lot of sugar, and it's really not gonna fill you up at all. Just be cautious and aware of the foods you're choosing. And if you always notice yourself going for the very low fat, no fat options, try a higher fat one, especially for cottage cheese or yogurt. Just give it a shot, see how it makes you feel. You might be surprised and you might actually end up getting more full in the long run. All right, so this section, the at a party section, this is one of the things I'm really excited about. First of all, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. Second, if you're not aware, I have something called the Sorting Hat Squad. If you like the video and you subscribe to the channel and then comment down below with hashtag Sorting Hat Squad, you'll be entered to win a free month in my inner circle. So now let's talk about what to do if you're at a party or a social event, going out to dinner. This is where I think a lot of people really struggle, especially with the consistency side of things. And then when they do it, when they do go out, they go into the, oh my God, I f***ed up mindset, but because you already know you can't f*** up, you're already better off for it, right? So if you skipped this section, go back, watch it, super important. I have two strategies that have worked unbelievably well with myself, inner circle members, clients, and I wanna share them with you because they can legitimately change your life. The first one, I call them bright lines. And basically, one of the reasons people struggle when they go out to social events, to parties, dinners, there's a lot of ambiguity. They don't know what's gonna be there. They don't know what they're gonna have. They don't wanna go off the rails. They feel like if there's a whole bunch of food, they're just gonna go binge. And that ambiguity, that not being sure of what's gonna happen, causes more anxiety, which then usually leads to a massive binge, and then feeling like you fucked up, and you know that road. So what I say is a bright line is a steadfast rule. It's a rule that you cannot break, and you make it before you go. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no right or wrong rule, but you just have to make a rule with yourself. So for example, one of my favorite rules is this. You're gonna go to the party. There's gonna be a lot of food. You can have whatever you want, but make it fit on one plate. You get one plate, whatever you want at the party, put it on that plate, but that's it. That's one option. Another option is this. Let's say you're going to a big dinner, there's a lot of desserts. You can choose whichever dessert you want, but only one, not all of them. Pick one dessert and you can have as much of that one dessert as you want, but only one. Let's say you're worried about drinking a lot of alcohol. Before you go out, give yourself a set number of drinks that you are allowed to have. So you know beforehand. There's no ambiguity here. There's no like, oh, I don't know, like I'm just gonna have like 7 drinks, whatever. Make a rule with yourself that you can't break. You run into trouble when you don't know and you sort of just go by the seat of your pants. You have to make a rule. And having these bright lines is so beneficial because then the anxiety's gone. You know what's gonna happen. It's just your job to follow it. I know a lot of people are like, oh yeah, easier said than done. And yes, of course it's fucking easier said than done. Everything is easier said than done, literally everything. But this is where you decide, do you actually want to achieve this or not? And if you do, setting these bright lines is going to make being in a calorie deficit way, way easier. Now this next strategy works very well especially if you end up in a group of people who are fucking obnoxious when you tell them that you're trying to watch your calories. Oh, come on, have a slice of cake. Oh, come on, live a little. You're a Debbie Downer. I can't stand those people. I cannot stand it. And unfortunately, usually what's going on is when they're really trying to like get on you for trying to stick to your goals, usually what's going on is they're uncomfortable that you're not eating all of the junk. So this is how they try and get you to do it so they can justify doing it themselves. So just keep that in mind. But doing a challenge, I'm gonna explain this in a second, works unbelievably well. So give this a shot. If you go out to a party, to a dinner, whatever, and you say, oh no, I'm trying to watch my calories, I'm on a diet, whatever it is you say, and for some reason, people feel entitled to say something like, oh, come on, live a little, oh, come on, it's not a big deal, da 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 da. But one thing I found, and I have no idea why this works, if you say, I'm doing a challenge with myself, all of a sudden it's like they just accept it. I've seen this time and again. It also works with drinking. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not drinking all of 2019. When I go out, people are like, oh, come on, have a drink. I'm like, oh no, I'm doing a challenge for the year, I'm not drinking. People are like, oh, cool. They don't say a word. But if I just say, oh no, I don't really drink, they're like, come on, have one on me. Come on, dude, have one. I'm like, bro, shut the fuck up. So by saying you have a challenge with yourself, for whatever reason I don't know, people tend to lay off. So give that a shot next time you're around the people who are trying to just like, come on, you can do it. Don't be a Debbie Downer. It works really well. All right, so now I wanna give you my personal recommendations for foods that I've found to be very, very filling, and also foods that I've found to be, unfortunately, not very filling. Starting with the more filling options. More filling for very few calories. Number one, seltzer water. Seltzer water, just because it has carbonation in it, will fill you up more than regular water. So when I'm in a deficit and I'm starting to get more hungry, I'm almost exclusively drinking seltzer. Also, by the way, miso soup, fucking amazing, really low calorie and very, very filling. You can get it at your grocery store, local Asian grocery shop, whatever you want. Very low calorie, tastes amazing. And for anybody worried about the sodium, it's not a big deal. As long as you're overall eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot of potassium, you're gonna be fine. So don't worry about that. In terms of fruits, watermelon's my favorite. Super low calorie, tons of water, it fills you up, it tastes fucking amazing. And if anybody tells you it's gonna make you fat because they have a high glycemic index, ask them, how many fucking people do you know who got fat from eating watermelon? It was the fucking watermelon that put on these 50 pounds. No one. Watermelon is totally fine. It's one of my all-time favorites. Oranges as well, apples. Those are my 3 top favorite fruits. And what you'll notice about them is they all have a lot of water content, right? When you get to more of like the fruit that doesn't have a lot of water, like a banana, for example, tend to be a little bit starchier. And it's not bad, by all means have them, but they tend to be more calorie dense and not as filling. From a protein perspective, any meat, chicken, turkey, beef, totally fine. I actually prefer the higher fat options. I know a lot of people say go lower fat, but for the reasons I spoke about here, the higher fat options, they fill me up more. And I just think they're tastier. So I prefer those. Also, Greek yogurt and cottage cheese. I think when I'm really in the depths of a deficit and I'm really going hard, watermelon and cottage cheese or watermelon and Greek yogurt, those are my main breakfasts almost every single day because it tastes amazing, super high protein, and really filling. Now for the last 2 on this list, olives fill me up a lot. Again, not initially, but I have olives right at the beginning of my meal with my salad. They really fill me up down the road by the end of the meal. And then also spicy foods. And for me personally, I just take cayenne, which it doesn't have any calories. Sprinkle some cayenne maybe on my salad, just a little bit, fills you up. And I actually don't know why that happens. As I'm making this video, I'm like, shit, why do you get full from eating spicy foods? I don't know, but I've seen this across a lot of people. So give it a shot. If you like spicy foods, add some cayenne, maybe some hot sauce. I like Frank's Red Hot, 0 calories, fucking delicious. So give that a shot. And now I wanna talk to you about some foods that might not fill you up as much as you would like. Now the first one, and I know it's obvious, so bear with me, fast food. And I'm telling you this because today is day 1 of my Big Mac challenge. Long story short, for 30 days, every day I'm having 1 Big Mac. And we're making a big compilation video, so at the end of 30 days, you can see how this has affected my body composition. I'm gonna be in a calorie deficit, I'm gonna be aiming to lose fat, and I wanna show you what happens to my body, both how I feel physically, mentally, and also what changes happen at the end of 30 days of having a Big Mac every day. So obviously, fast food, it's not gonna be as filling. I'm not a big fan of it, but doesn't mean you can't incorporate it while still making progress. Other foods that might not be as filling as you want, I already said it earlier, rice cakes. I know some people love them, and if you love them, have them by all means. Personally, I get more hungry when I have them. And I know a lot of people who've said the same thing, where it's almost just like they see how low calorie they are, so they end up having 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, when in reality, if they just had 2 regular slices of bread or a fucking bagel, they would have enjoyed it more for the same amount of calories or less. And remember, if you're eating something that ends up with you binging, it might just be more worthwhile to eat the thing you want in the first place, especially if it doesn't end with you binging. Also, nuts and nut butters, they're often touted, especially in mainstream media, as health foods, and they're fine if you want to have them, but they're super high calorie. They're very high calorie, they're not really very filling, and the portion sizes are way smaller than most people think. If you've never actually measured how much peanut butter or almond butter you're having, or how many almonds or cashews you're having, weigh it out, measure it. And usually one portion size of 200 calories, 300 calories is way smaller than we actually want. And I say this from someone who fucking loves peanut butter, but I tend not to eat it because if I'm gonna eat it, I'm gonna eat the whole fucking thing and it's just not worth it. And lastly, just on the short list, granola and trail mix, which it pains me to say it because they're so freaking good, but they're usually way higher calorie and not nearly as filling as you'd like them to be. Now, one of the most common questions as soon as I say that is, well, what if you're making the granola at home? That's fine. Even if you're not making it at home, it's fine. Just be aware of how many calories it has. Usually, it's more calories than we want, and it's so easy to overdo it. Just to literally have 500, 600, 700 calories of it very quickly, and then what happens is you got a lot of carbs, which is fine, but no protein, and then you don't have many calories left in the day, and it's an almost unenjoyable day, which leads me into something that I completely forgot to mention on this board. And I want to tell you a really quick story, which is probably the most important psychological tip or hack that I can use to help make calorie deficits suck less. Now, I know this video is really long, so if you've made it this far, huge, huge, huge thank you. I appreciate it immensely. And I wouldn't be telling you this story and this trick if it wasn't massively, massively important and helpful. So basically, one of the major reasons that I see people having so much trouble with calorie deficits is because as they get closer and closer to reaching their daily calorie limit, they start to get anxious. Like, oh my God, I'm almost done. I'm almost out of calories. What do I do? And that anxiety and fear often leads to a binge, which makes you think you fucked up, which goes down that whole road we spoke about at the very beginning. What I want you to do is this. I want you, if you're getting to a point where you're getting nervous or anxious that you're almost out of calories, have a plan, create a bright line. Worst comes to worst, you add 500 calories, maybe you add 1,000 calories to your day. Because what you can do here is then you're not breaking the rules. You're not screwing up. Worst comes to worst, you have maybe 500, 1,000 extra calories, and you get back on track the next day. The issue is when you don't create that rule, and you restrict and you restrict and you restrict and you restrict, and all this anxiety and fear builds up until you explode and you have 5,000 extra calories, 10,000 extra calories. You go on a week-long bender, a month-long bender, you just say f it and quit altogether. This is what I want to avoid. I would way rather you have 1,000 calories more one night and get back on track the next day than restrict and restrict and restrict and then massively binge and give up and feel terrible about yourself. And this is a very important concept to implement into your own nutrition. You have to be very self-aware and you have to be very honest and objective with yourself. Like a lot of people get scared the first time they try it. They're like, oh my God, I'm gonna add an extra 1,000 calories? Yeah, so what? I'd rather you have 1,000 extra calories or 500 or 300 than feel guilty and restrict and then binge down the road. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you don't already, and comment below with hashtag SortingHatSquad to win a free month in my inner circle. Talk to you soon.